As well, for more on this report, I was joined by Brian Hansford a short time ago. He's the spokesman for the United Nations High Commission on Refugees here in Washington. Brian, why are there 51 million refugees around the world now? Is it just because we have a lot of conflicts at the same time, or is it something about the conflicts themselves?
Primarily the number of conflicts, Cathy. The numbers are driven by the Syria crisis, of course, but there are, of course, conflicts in Central African Republic, South Sudan, and there are, of course, the protracted conflicts. Afghanistan, for example. My last posting, I spent almost 3 years in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is still the country of origin for most of the refugees, many of whom have spent 30 years in refugee camps in Pakistan, and these are protracted conflicts which last. Children are born in camps, they live in camps, and they survive in camps.
It's interesting, isn't it, that a lot of the conflicts you mention, Afghanistan, Syria, Central African Republic, they're conflicts that are happening almost like civil wars within states. It's not the traditional pattern that people might think of one country fighting another country. Does that make a difference?
Well, for example, the Syria crisis, there are almost 3 million Syrian refugees in the region, mostly in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Turkey, and in Egypt. But there are, of course, 6.5 million so-called internally displaced people, i.e. people who have fled their homes but have not crossed the borders. And the report that we put out today, the 2013 Refugee Trends Report, we're talking about over 32,000 people a day fleeing their homes because of war and persecution. And most of them actually don't cross borders. They're internally displaced persons.
But doesn't that make it even harder? I mean, in a way, that changes the nature of the mission, doesn't it? Because if you've got people who are internally displaced, but they're still living in their conflict zone, they haven't managed to leave the war zone, it's even harder to get to them, isn't it?
Absolutely, Cathy, and Syria is a classic example of this. UNHCR with our partners, with OCHA, of course, the humanitarian coordinating agency, with our partners, UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, very difficult getting access, and not only because of the conflict, but also there are sort of very inaccessible areas inside the countries, whereas when they become refugees, when they cross their borders, we have more control, if you like, in many aspects.
What's the world's response, Brian? I mean, obviously this is a headline figure and people will be talking about it today. Is the sheer number of people who are displaced around the world now making it paradoxically harder to get the rest of the world engaged in this problem?
Well, the numbers this year, and it is the highest number since World War II, over 50 million, 51.2 million. There's a great need, humanitarian assistance.
Is the world responding?
Frankly, no. And humanitarian actors like the organization I work for, UNHCR, like UNICEF, our partners, other UN and international organizations, we're not a cure. The political is the answer. Politics is the answer, but we have this inability. The international community has an inability to come to a political solution. So we as humanitarians are basically a band-aid, if you like, to a gaping wound. And so more assistance is desperately needed.
Brian Hansford, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you very much.